Hello, friends. Today I'm going to summarize the book Fourth Wing by the author Rebecca Yarros. It is worth noting that this video has been made with illustrations that depict the situations that are narrated. Without further ado, let's begin. Violet Sorrengail had thought for most of her life that she would be a scribe. Yet here she was, about to face her first test to become a dragon rider. On that day, hundreds of 20-somethings were eagerly awaiting a place in the rider's quadrant, having trained most of their lives to achieve that goal. Unlike her, who had only been training for 6 months, which, it should be noted, had made almost no difference to her weak body. That decision had not been Violet's decision, at least not of her own free will. Her mother, who was commanding general of the Basgith army, had decided that Al Sorrengail too should be a dragon rider, just as her older siblings had been. That day, Violet had shown up at her mother's office only to find Mira, her sister, trying unsuccessfully to talk her out of the idea of sending her to certain death. Mira, 6 years her senior, was strong and agile, and one of the best dragon riders in recent years, everything Violet, no doubt, could never be. Not with her short stature, weak, thin body, and almost no agility. She had been raised by her father, from a very young age, to be a scribe, after it became apparent how frail she was. Her mother had contracted a strange illness during pregnancy that had nearly killed her and made her a weaker child than normal. Her father had always loved and accepted her as she was, but he had died a year ago. So now all that remained was to obey her mother's wishes, which were, evidently, for her to join the quadrant of riders. Mira was aware of all this, of how little chance Violet had of surviving conscription, and that even if she made it far enough to be in front of a dragon, she could easily be burned, as those creatures had a habit of incinerating the weakest cadets. That was why she had urged her mother to abandon the idea and let Violet go to the scribe quadrant. But even when Mira reminded the general of her other son's death, she would not give in. Violet would become a dragon rider, or die trying. Resigned to this, Mira then decides to help her pass that first test. She gives her a couple of tips, a pair of new boots as well, and empties her backpack, making it lighter. She also gave her an armor made of dragon scales, her dragon, and reprimanded her for not having cut her hair, as besides being a hindrance in her trials due to its length, it could make her an easy target for the others due to its color, brown at the roots, gray at the ends. The first test to become a cadet was to pass the parapet, a thin stone bridge across a deep chasm. But first, Mira warns him about the marked ones, a group of boys made up of the children of members of the rebellion, a conflict that existed years before at the hands of various traitors. The boys were punished for their parents' crime by being recruited into the horsemen's quadrant. Mira tells him to be careful, as the mere fact that they know who his mother is a reason for them to want to kill her. She also warns her, above all, to stay away from Xaden Riorson, as his father was the leader of the rebellion and was killed by their mother. Search for Dane Aitos is the last thing she orders her to do. On the way up to the parapet, Violet meets Rhiannon, a girl to whom she offers one of her boots to help her over the parapet. Upon arriving at the site, she discovers that it is Xaden Riorson who is greeting the applicants. Yes, exactly the boy Mira had warned her about. Violet discovered, ironically, that he was extremely handsome and couldn't help but feel a strange combination of fear of what he might do to her and excitement at what the sexy man was undoubtedly arousing in her. After exchanging a couple of words, recalling that his father had been executed by her mother and her brother had been killed by his father, Violet asks him directly if he plans to kill her, but he tells her that in fact he expects the parapet to do it for him. Violet starts to cross the parapet, knowing the odds against her, considering that several boys have already fallen. But luck doesn't seem to be on her side when two things happen. First, it starts raining, which makes it more difficult to cross the narrow stone bridge, and second, a cocky guy named Jack is after her and threatens to throw her off the parapet if he catches her. But against all odds, she manages to pass the test. Almost immediately, Violet discovers that a slip on the parapet injured one of her knees. This is a problem, as it can give a bad impression in front of the others, who will think she is weak, prompting them to get rid of her. But, as if sent by the gods, Dane, her childhood friend, and now second-year rider and platoon leader, with whom she has been in love forever, appears. He takes her to a safe place where she can bandage her knee. He then tells her that he will help her escape to the scribe quadrant, where she should be. But Violet refuses, filled with anger that Dane thinks her weak and incapable of surviving the place, even if he was right. So, after a brief discussion, they decide that they will look for another solution later and head for the formation. There, Violet sees for the first time Commander Banshee, or whatever it is called. The man has the power to see the outcome of any battle before it happens, an ability granted to him through his bond with his dragon, as with all riders. In this world, the riders do not choose the dragon, but the other way around. It is the majestic beasts that decide on their rider, and after making their choice, a bond is created between the two, sharing an unbreakable connection that even allows them to communicate telepathically and gives the rider a unique ability. The choice of the rider occurs in an event called the threshing, which takes place after several months and tests the cadets who manage to survive. And even during the process, any dragon can decide to get rid of a cadet if they are not strong enough, so appearing weak in front of them is not an option. After a brief speech, the new cadets are assigned to their leaders. Violet is placed under the command of Dane, who in turn is under the command of Xaden. Soon after, the dragons appear, and Violet gets her first glimpse of Scale, Xaden's huge and terrifying dragon, who seems to be more lethal than the others, as well as witnessing the first incineration of many. The next day, Dane tells him that the bond with his dragon has given him the power to read minds, but only when he has contact with the person, specifically by touching the person's temple. After a brief encounter with Xaden, who seems to be stalking her, waiting for an opportunity to end her life, Violet attends her first class. There, she learns that attacks have been recorded by Poromil, an enemy community that tends to form bonds with powerful creatures called griffins. Later that day, Violet has her first hand-to-hand confrontation in physical training class. There, she is confronted by Imogen, a third-year marker, who breaks a couple of her bones before Violet can even defend herself. Later, when she returns to sleep after being cured, she discovers that her sister has left in her bed a diary written by Brennan, her deceased brother, in which she wrote several pieces of advice that would help her in her process to become a dragon rider. The first tip is about hand-to-hand training. Brennan reveals that both the matches and the opponents are selected by the instructors a week in advance, and they always match the strongest with the weakest, looking to get rid of them. So if Violet can sneak into the right place, she can find out who her next opponent will be and prepare ahead of time. She then decides to start his confrontation before the day even arrives. To do so, she uses the only book Mira allowed him to carry, which is basically an encyclopedia on how to prepare poison, so she collects different ingredients and prepares doses to use against his opponents. One night, while sneaking into the top of a tree to look for some poisonous berries, she witnesses something unusual. A group of marked people gather in the place, all of them children of the Separatists. This surprises Violet, as it is forbidden for more than 3 of them to gather in one place to avoid plots. But the boys seem to be looking to support each other. Xaden, who shows himself to be the apparent leader, orders Imogen and another boy named Garrick, who, it should be noted, is also his cousin, to train the first years. Minutes later, they all leave, and when Violet thinks she is finally alone, she is intercepted by Xaden, who, hiding in the darkness, drags her towards him with a knife to her throat. Outraged, she asks him how he discovered her, and then discovers that he has the power to control shadows, an ability he has acquired because of his bond with her dragon. Violet is sure that he will kill her at that very moment, so in an attempt to show him that she can defend herself, she throws a pair of daggers that graze the sides of his head and land in a tree behind his back. This, of course, doesn't intimidate him in the slightest, but it doesn't hurt him either. He just lets her go. By the next day, Violet has discovered who her next opponent will be. And since she has volunteered to serve breakfast, she takes the opportunity to pour poison into her rival's food. Later, in a history class, Violet learns a little about the types of dragons, including Scale, the strong and rebellious dragoness of Xaden in turn, one of the few black dragons and the most powerful of his race, but who is unwilling to bond with anyone since the death of his last rider in the rebellion. Later, Violet faces her first opponent, a boy named Orin, whom she easily defeats thanks to the discomfort that makes him vacate everything he ate for breakfast. And so it goes for the next 5 weeks, until the poison takes effect too soon on her 6th opponent and Xaden offers to take his place. But the boy, again, does not try to kill her, but uses the practice to teach her self-defense techniques. This practice not only helps Violet to gain a little more confidence in him, but also awakens feelings in her that she cannot yet understand or accept. After this, Dane tells Violet that he is concerned for her safety, and for that reason, he again insists on the idea of taking her to the scribe quadrant. This upsets Violet, but she agrees to think about it, since there is only a month left before the threshing, where she will probably be incinerated by a dragon for being the weakest, or one of her enemies will send her to the other side. The gauntlet is one of the most dangerous trials that aspiring dragon riders must face. It is an obstacle course along a high cliff. Violet discovers, a few days later, that they must pass it as a team, and on this will depend not only their lives, as in all the other situations in this book, but also their attendance at the threshing. On that first attempt, Violet discovers that she is too small to overcome the last obstacle, which is a huge ramp that she must run up to the top, so she must figure out how to overcome it for the final test. That night, as she slips into the darkness, she meets Xaden again. He tells her that he knows of Dane's plan to take her to the scribe quadrant and encourages her not to give up. He knows she is smaller than the others, but that doesn't mean she should give up. The right way is not the only way, he tells her, and leaves. The day comes to pass the gauntlet and then go to the flying field to be evaluated by the dragons, who will decide if they are worthy to present themselves for the threshing, but also the last day to decide whether to take Dane's proposal. Violet, of course, decides to stay because, why not? And as she passes the gauntlet, she helps herself by sticking a dagger in the ramp. Amber, a second-year rider, complains and demands that Violet be disqualified, but Violet defends herself by citing some rules of the rules. Soon after, they pass through the flying field, parading in front of the more than 100 dragons that are open to bonding this year. Among them is a feathertail, a rare specimen of dragon that rarely chooses to look for a rider. But this is no ordinary feathertail. Its scales are golden and glistening, and it is small compared to the other dragons that outnumber it in size by 20 times or more. The day of the threshing comes. The dragons will not hesitate to incinerate the weakest, and even if they did not decide to burn her to ashes, there was a chance that no dragon would decide to bond with her, which would mean repeating the first year to try their luck in the next threshing, as had happened to one of her companions. I wish Rhiannon luck, who would go after a green dragon, and she sets off to find her own. But then she discovers that Jack, yes, the one who tried to throw her off the parapet, and 2 other boys are trying to hunt the little golden dragon. Violet tries to persuade the dragon to fly away and escape, as it seems to lack fire, but the little one just looks at her, totally helpless. She then tries to convince Jack's friends not to do anything to him, but fails in the attempt. Xaden then appears, but there is not much he can do. According to the rules, no superior can interfere with events during the threshing. Jack lunges at her, trying to kill her, but Violet stabs him in the shoulder with a dagger and he flees. The other 2 stay behind, one of them managing to hit her with a sword before she strikes him in the head and knocks him unconscious. The dragon scale armor given to her by Mira saves her from receiving a cut to the stomach that would probably have killed her, but there is still one more opponent. She tries to intimidate him, wielding a dagger with what little strength she has left. But just as she is about to be attacked by him, something happens. A huge black dragon appears behind him and telepathically orders him to move. After this, it launches a flare of fire, incinerating the boy, while the other remains unconscious, alive. Then he tells Violet to climb on his back. Now, He is her dragon, and she is his rider. He has chosen her. Turn, as the dragon is called, flies with Violet on his back to the training grounds, where they are waiting to register the bond. But the girl falls through the air with the dragon's first impulse as he flies, so he is forced to hold her for the entire journey. "Why did you choose me?" Violet asks Turn, since he is one of the most powerful dragons and she is one of the weakest riders. "I chose you because you defended her," he replies, referring to the golden dragon. "But you are also the smartest of your year and the most cunning. The strength of bravery is more important than physical strength." To register the link with a dragon, the rider must say the full name of the animal, as this is only revealed to him in complete confidentiality. But after he registers Turn, the golden dragoness also speaks to him, giving him her name. Andarna is what she is called. Now she has 2 dragons, and that seems to be a big problem, as never, in the history of Navarre, has a rider been linked to 2 dragons. Turn warns him that he will have to meet the rest of the dragons, especially Coda, the dragon of General Melgren, leader of Bisgyath's army, and the only dragon that manages to surpass him in size and probably also in strength. Turn orders Violet to stay close to Xaden. The boy watches her from afar, but as she is about to approach him, Rhiannon appears at his side along with Riddoch and Sawyer, 2 of her other companions who have successfully bonded with dragons, and they embrace and congratulate each other in celebration of their achievements until Dain appears behind Violet. The boy hugs her and tells her that they will make her choose between the 2 dragons and that she should choose Andarna, as the dragon cannot fly, and in this way, they will leave Violet at the academy, perhaps as a teacher, and she will not be forced to go out to fight. Violet balks at the idea of choosing, but Dain insists that it must be Andarna, and explains that if she chooses Turn, she will be at Xaden's mercy, since Scale, the boy's dragon, is Turn's mate. Dragon couples can't be separated for long because their health declines. So from now on, Violet is basically tied to Xaden. That doesn't relieve her, but it doesn't completely terrify her either. Xaden saved her life in the confrontation against Jack and the other 2 boys, when at one point he warned her that he had one of them on his back. He had also had several opportunities to get rid of her, but had failed to do so. He had even helped her by giving her a couple of lessons on how to fight and defend herself as they faced each other in combat class. She could be wrong, but Xaden seemed to care about her. And when Violet tells him how her bond with Turn happened, Dain theorizes that it's all a plan by Xaden, who made Turn bond with her to get her under his control. Xaden then appears and explains that in reality, it was Scale who called Turn, and the dragon's choice to bond with Violet was his alone. He then approaches Dain and asks him if, in his position, he would not have done the same. If he saw Violet in danger, he would not have intervened. Dain answers no. Even if it would have led to her death, he is willing to respect the rules no matter what. This hurts Violet's feelings, but she lets it go. Xaden then explains to her that they are now connected and depend on each other because of their dragon bond. If something happens to her, it will inevitably happen to Turn, and consequently to Scale, because she is his mate, and ultimately to Xaden. But in addition, there are 41 cadets who failed to get a link, and now that they know Turn is linked, they will go after her to kill her and keep her dragon for themselves. Later, it is announced that the dragons have decided that they will respect Turn and Andarna's decision to choose Violet as their rider, and after this, she receives the mark of their bond, a tattoo on her back showing a black dragon with its wings open in full flight and a very small golden one in the center of it. The event is closed, and the other riders celebrate as Dain comes up to her and kisses her. Violet had been waiting for this moment for years, since she was a child, really. She had waited for the tickle in her stomach, the feeling of happiness, the illusion of flying when their lips touched. But none of it happened, at least not on her part. It was everything she had wanted, but now, it wasn't what she wanted. The next day, Violet discovers that Xaden has given orders to Imogen, yes, the girl who beat her up, to train her, but she also notices that everyone around her respects her for fear of Turn. Later, she meets Dane, who tells her that the kiss was a mistake, because although he loved her and wanted to be with her, being together would be against the rules. This disappoints Violet, not because she wanted to have something with him, but because of the fact that he always puts rules above everything else. Violet's first days as a rider pass quickly enough. She is assigned to fetch and carry mail from the rider quadrant to the scribe quadrant, but she has not yet begun to manifest the power she should have from her bond with Turn, nor her seal, which should give her a special ability. Later, Dane expresses his concern for her again, especially now that he knows she is unable to stand on Turn's back on her own. He even reproaches her for breaking the rules in her climb up the parapet ramp. Fed up with the situation, Violet makes it clear to him that there will never be anything in them, not because it's against the rules, but because he doesn't believe in her. That same night, while sleeping and dreaming of her father, Violet is attacked. A group of 7 dragonless horsemen have infiltrated her room and are attacking her. 4 men and 1 woman, one of whom turns out to be a familiar face. The horsemen attack, including Orin, Jack's friend who Violet knocked unconscious on the day of the threshing. She tries to defend herself, but there are so many of them. She is about to die when something incredible happens. A power enters the room in the form of golden light and stops time long enough to let Violet escape from Orin's hands. By the time she returns to normal, Zayden is at her side, strangling the shadows of those in the room. After this, Zayden takes her outside where they meet his dragons. Andarna then explains to Violet that the power to stop time is actually hers, and that the reason Feathertails don't usually bond is because they can give their powers to humans by accident. It is not like the seal, as this is a combination of the dragon's power with the rider's abilities. They also discover that Andarna is basically a hatchling. She is only 2 years old, and her parents died when she was still in her egg. Turn and Scale adopted her. The fact that feathertail dragons give their power to humans is a double-edged sword, as any rider with evil intentions could hunt them down and use their powers until they are exhausted and rendered lifeless, so they decide to keep that a secret. However, it is likely that Andarna's power will disappear once the dragon grows up. Later, Violet confesses to Zayden the identity of the girl who opened the door to her room, and the next day, the boy exposes her in front of everyone. The stranger ends up being Amber, the same one who insisted on being expelled when she used the dagger in the gauntlet, but she is also a close friend of Dane. Dane refuses to believe it and asks Violet to deny it, but she confirms the information, so he demands that she show him her memories and approaches her to touch her temple. But she turns away, indignant. Violet then asks Turn to share her memory with the other dragons so they can show it to their riders, and they do. Amber is convicted of a serious crime, attempting to kill a rider at his most vulnerable moment, while he sleeps. Turn executes the punishment, which is a death sentence, and incinerates her despite Violet's, and the girl's own, pleas for a second chance. Zayden then decides to put one of them marked to protect Violet while he is not around, and despite the girl's complaints that she doesn't need a bodyguard, he chooses Liam, the best first-year rider, for the task. A week later, Liam has become Violet's shadow, and also her friend. During a visit to the library in the scribe's quadrant, she asks the boy where he knows Zayden from. He explains that they were both put in the same foster home after their parents were executed, as their homes were given to high-ranking officers who did not participate in the rebellion. Liam also had a sister from whom he was separated. That same night, while she is in her room, something happens. A current of energy begins to run through her body. An uncontrollable power vibrates inside her and makes her feel like she's about to explode. Was she channeling her power? She leaves the room, a little bewildered, and as soon as she sees Liam out there, she discovers what she's really feeling: lust. Suddenly, she begins to see him with different eyes, with eyes of desire. Liam is handsome, of course he is. Tall, fit, blue eyes and blonde hair, but she wasn't in her 5 senses. She didn't genuinely desire him, All that feeling, that desire, and those uncontrollable desires to possess him were on Turn's part. The dragon was transmitting his feelings to her. He looks at her worriedly, but she assures him that everything is fine and returns to her room before she makes any mistakes. But as soon as she is sure he has left, she decides to go outside to get some fresh air. She then encounters Xaden, who immediately senses what is happening, as he too can feel what Scale feels. But having already channeled his power, he knows how to block the link between his dragon and himself to minimize the feelings. He then offers to teach Violet how to do it, which he does. But even though he has managed to block that rush of feelings, though it can't be blocked entirely, it should be noted, their desire gets out of control and they kiss. And the feeling of his lips on hers is much better than she could have imagined. However, it is Xaden who decides to stop the moment, telling her that he does not want to take advantage of her, as it is not her feelings that are overpowering her, but Turn's. And though whatever the dragon was doing is over, Violet nods and returns to her room. The next day, Dane talks to her and apologizes for what happened with Amber, although he is jealous that she trusts Xaden more than him. A week passes, and Violet has managed to defeat 2 opponents in combat classes without resorting to poisonous herbs. But just when she thought all was finally quiet, she discovers that her next opponent will be Jack. She tells Liam but makes him promise not to tell anyone, least of all Xaden, as it would give her away and the secret that she's been spying on the list of opponents. But once the fight starts, Violet allows Liam to search for Xaden, but he doesn't arrive in time. Violet is forced to fight Jack, and as expected, the guy easily beats her by landing a couple of blows to her ribs and face and plunging a dagger into one of her arms. But when he is about to electrocute her to death with his power, Violet makes him swallow a few drops of orange juice, a fruit to which he is allergic, and then falls unconscious. When she wakes up, she's in the infirmary with Xaden by her side. He complains that he didn't warn her that she was going up against Jack, and she tells him that she would have if he hadn't ignored her since that kiss. He replies that it was a mistake, as getting involved in any way would have made things too complicated. 3 months have passed since the threshing, and Violet still hasn't manifested her seal. She has minor powers, but has not yet manifested her seal. After winning a contest, Violet's team of riders travels to a fortress. There she meets Mira, whom she hasn't seen for 9 months. Later, Xaden arrives and the atmosphere becomes tense. Soon, Violet discovers that she can communicate telepathically with Xaden as she does with Turn, due to the dragon connection. While there, a group of griffins attack the fortress, and Mira orders Xaden to take Violet to safety. Violet fights, refusing to leave, but Xaden manages to buy time by giving her a kiss as Turn arrives and whisks her away. Hours later, they are back in the Horseman's Quadrant, and a few hours later, they learn that there have been no casualties in Mira's fortress. The next day, while participating in a competition, Liam is attacked by Jack, who wounds him with a sword. This enrages Violet, who manifests her seal and with the use of her rage splits the sky with a bolt of lightning that strikes Jack, throwing him into a chasm. Now her power is exposed. She manipulates lightning. Sending Jack to the other side creates doubts in Violet, as she sees her power only as a weapon for evil, and not as something she can use in a positive way. That's why Xaden visits her that night and tries to cheer her up, but they end up kissing again, and that kiss turns into something more. And everything gets out of control when Violet's emotions split the sky with dozens of lightning bolts that light up the room, destroying everything in their path as they share their first night together, giving themselves completely to the desire they have contained since the first time they saw each other. That same night, Xaden confesses to him that the 107 scars on his back correspond to the miners who have been marked with the relic of rebellion, one for each of them. He explains that he made a deal in which he takes responsibility for the loyalty of the marked ones, and in return, they would be allowed to be part of the quadrant of riders, instead of losing their lives like their parents. This means that if any of them betray Navarre, he will have to pay for it with his life. He also tells her that the night she was attacked, he had gone out to pour a meal, but does not explain anything else. The next day, after practicing their power with the help of a teacher, Violet and Zidane clean up the mess they left the night before. He had told her not to fall in love with him, even though he had left her freshly cut flowers that morning. Violet realized that it was too late for that request. She was too involved to ignore how she felt, and if they shared a night like the previous one again, she was absolutely certain that she would end up falling in love. Zidane, however, refused this. He claimed that she didn't know him, but Violet was determined and told him that in reality, she thought he would fall in love with her too. Seeing that he was unwilling to accept her feelings, she decides that last night would be a one-time thing, and that it would not happen again until she decided it would, as she was not willing to put her heart at risk. A month and a half goes by, and Violet still can't get a handle on her lightning aim. They're 10 days away from graduation, which means they'll soon know which defense post they'll be sending third years to, including Zidane. On that day, the day on which the rebellion was broken up, was celebrated. The same day that the fathers of all the market had been stripped of their lives. Zidane had disappeared, and Violet found him sitting in the middle of the parapet. Just him, his shadows, and his thoughts. There, they have a conversation in which he admits that he also has feelings for her, as if it wasn't obvious enough already, and he welcomes her feelings, accepting that they go beyond what they have now. That night, they share a bed again, and she confesses that she loves him. But then, they are interrupted. The war games have begun. These are a kind of Olympics for the dragon riders, and this time, they must pretend to defend the fortresses of Navarre from enemy attack. To do this, they will travel to these fortresses and guard them for 5 days. Initially, Violet is to go with Dane. However, Zidane objects to this, saying that he will take her wherever he goes. Dane tries to object, claiming that Zidane is only using her to get revenge on his mother, and is hurt when he realizes that there is something between them, but eventually accepts his decision and lets her go. They then set off in the company of their dragons to Poramil. The road is long, so they decide to stop for the dragons to rest, but while this is happening, they are intercepted by 2 griffin riders, who seem to know Zidane very well. Soon, Violet discovers that the boy has been exchanging weaponry with the 2 men, who also speak of another common enemy, the Venom, strange magical creatures that Violet had only read about in an old folklore book that her father gave her as a child, and that Mira returned to her the last time they met. He is a traitor. Zidane is a traitor, just like Tern and Andarna and the others marked. It's all a conspiracy against Navarre, and she was deluded to believe him. Once the Griffin Riders leave, Violet confronts him. Zidane explains that all the attacks that have happened lately have been from the Venom, and that he is trading weapons with the Griffin Riders in order to fight them. Navarre's army, Violet's mother included, are aware of the existence of these beings, but choose to do nothing because their territory is well guarded with protections against their magic, so they prefer to keep their existence a secret. But while their lands are safe, there are other places that remain vulnerable to the Venom. Zidane explains that he couldn't risk telling her earlier, because there was a chance that Dane would read his mind and learn the truth. Violet decides to take Zidane at his word, but does not forgive his lie. They decide to continue on their way, but when they reach Poramil, it is empty. At some point, Dane has managed to touch Violet long enough to read her mind, retrieving that brief conversation in which Zidane told the girl about his travels there. He has betrayed her. Dane has read her mind without her permission and has informed his superiors. Liam finds a letter signed by Dane's father, who tells them that their mission is to survive, though evidently none of that is part of the war games. They have been sent to die. On the other side of the letter, they find that they actually have a choice. If they leave right now, they can continue the war games, but Poramil will be destroyed, as will its inhabitants. If they stay instead, they will die. They all decide to stay and help the Griffin Riders protect that city, but something chilling happens. The Venom appear, and along with them, a horde of Giverns, strange creatures capable of slaying any dragon or griffin. But the boys also discover that the Venom are immune to fire, and that they will not be able to get rid of the Griffins unless they kill their creators. Soon, Violet discovers that she can kill the venom using her lightning, but she's not quite good enough at it yet. At one point, Tern is attacked by one of the Giverns, and Liam's dragon defends them, but is caught by the creature who leaves him lifeless and takes Liam's life with him. After this, Violet assumes that only she can help them win this battle, and to do so, she must use her power and hit the most powerful of the venom with her lightning bolts, even if it leads to her death. After several failed attempts and a stab from the venom, Violet manages to hit a bolt of lightning before being consumed by its power and falling from Tern's back. She has done it. She has ended it all, but it has been at the cost of her own life. Or not. And Darna stops in time for Tern to catch her in midair. The dagger she was stabbed with was poisoned. When Violet awakens, it is Xaden who narrates the scene. It has been 3 days that the girl has been unconscious, and Darna had lost her power after that last attempt to save her, and she had also grown in size. But in addition, they had been forced to take Violet to a place that until now had remained hidden from Navarre's eyes, to Arisha, the city where Xaden was born, a place that had been burned to the ground after the rebellion, and was currently being rebuilt. In addition, Garrick has managed to salvage from the rubble a mysterious object that was apparently the target of the venom, who were looking to steal it. Violet is still upset with Xaden, and a little hurt too, but she agrees to join the cause and help them fight the venom. She is now part of the rebellion. However, she still doesn't trust him, even though she still loves him. She then asks him if there is a possibility that the confrontation against the venom was a coincidence and not a raid by Navarre. But before Xaden can answer, someone interrupts them, and it is then that Violet discovers that her brother Brennan is still alive, and that he is the one who has repaired her, saving her from the poison. "Welcome to the revolution, Violet," he says with a smile on his lips. If you like this kind of video, let me know in the comments, and by subscribing to this channel, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll hear from you next time.